the goal is today is I can't teach you everything about maintenance in an hour and a half. I'm going to try and highlight everything, just give you some really good tips, some really good things that we found through the course of the years that's worked for us, and hopefully it might work for you or it will work for you, and just give you some options that you might not know about, let you know about some of the updates that have come through in the last couple of years, and we'll go from there. I like to run a real informal class, so if you got any questions at any time, raise your hand, yell them out, it really doesn't matter. I'll be happy to answer any of the questions I can. Okay, let's go to what we got there. First, the disclaimer. Information provided today is the best information I have at this time. It's 35 years of accumulated knowledge that has worked for our, what has worked and what has failed for our company. There you go. When in doubt, always refer to your owner's manual. The owner's manual is one of the things we have, an owner's manual for every piece of equipment we have. And with newer equipment, you'd be amazed the wealth of information that's in them. It tells you exactly what they want for oils, lubricants, coolants, that kind of thing. It'll also give you a schedule on when you need to change or perform the maintenance on your equipment. If you lose your manuals for your equipment, the almighty Google is a great place to go. You can almost find anything you need there these days. Okay, the agenda, we're kind of go through these several systems. And the first one we'll go through is air intake. That's the easy one. Okay, first thing on your air intake systems, you want to do an inspection. When you're doing your daily inspection, first thing you want to do is check to make sure that your system is intact. You want to make sure that all your clamps are tight, all your hoses and ducts are in good condition, no cuts, no abrasions. A lot of times if the equipment's running, it'll rub next to something else and you can get a hole in there. Holes are bad. I've always been told when I was in school that all it takes is 3 tablespoons of dirt can kill an engine. 3 tablespoons of dirt is nothing, and it's real easy to suck that in through a hole after the air filter. So it's important to inspect all these systems. We lost an engine probably 15 years ago. One of our operators was cleaning out the air filter. Didn't go in real easy, so he jammed it in. Well, when he jammed that in, it pushed the back end of the filter out. His filter fit, got the clamps on, and a week later the engine was dusted and burning oil, a gallon a day. So it was a junk engine. Where if you would have been a little more careful, would have fitted it right, that engine would probably still be running today. Let's see what do we got here. Filters, make sure your filters are in good condition, not plugged or damaged. A lot of times your guys will pull the filters out, they'll clean them up real quick, and they'll sit there and bang them on the tire, ground, whatever. You can damage the casings or you can cut the pleats. A lot of times they'll take a blowgun to blow them out, and they'll have the pressure cranked all the way to 150 psi, which will take and punch the pleats out of the filter. Always regulate your air pressure down to about 30 psi if you're going to use that to clean out your air filters. I'm going to show you 3 different design types of air filters, what they've got now, the advantages and disadvantages. This is probably the old style you've seen. It's got a radial seal here, another seal in the end there. If you don't put that little gasket in there that's usually attached to the side, it's an access point for dust to leak in there. So always make sure you change that gasket or make sure it's in good condition. Same thing, it's got a small seal surface here, so it doesn't take much to get a piece of dirt, debris in there where you can bypass the filter. These can be cleaned a couple times, take and blow them out when they get plugged up, 4 or 5 times, then replace them. The other style, or the newer style you've probably seen or might have seen, is the radial seal. A lot like that one here, a little more area, but it's got a continuous seal all the way around there, much larger. Same thing, you can take these out, clean them several times, blow them out from the inside and the outside just to get all the dirt out. What these have that's nice is they usually have a safety seal or a safety filter on the inside. Don't skip this. A lot of guys, figure out it can stay in there for 20 years. change this annually when you change your filters out. You normally don't need to clean this, because if you're starting to clean this isn't working. This should always look fairly decent, but change it anyways. Now this one seals on the inside, where this one here seals on the outside. Just gives you an extra added protection for the engines. And this is the newer style. A lot of equipment, it looks smaller. These you can't clean up. They're a one and done type of filter. Though they're a honeycomb style, so the amount of pleats you have in here is almost 10 times the amount of filtering surface that those have. So once these are full, usually your restriction gauge will go off, or you'll have a light on your dashboard, whatever. Pull them out, throw them away. Don't bother trying to clean them. It never works. However, these do go quite a lot. You can probably get, these will go about 10 times as long as those filters there before change. Now, there we go. It's good to have an assistant. How many of you have seen the restriction gauge on your equipment? Okay. This should be something you look at every day. When you're doing your daily inspection, always take a peek at it, see where the level's at. You can tell if it's getting due to be changed or serviced, or if it needs to be replaced. What I always suggest though is every day you look at this, hit the reset. That way you can see kind of where it was, it's pulling about halfway. You hit the reset, you look at it tomorrow, and it's not pulling any restriction at all. Well, someone changed a filter for you, or you've got a leak in your system that isn't showing the restrictions. So it's just another something to look at to help you make sure your filter and your filter system is good. Same thing, some of your equipment will have, instead of a restriction gauge, you just have a light on the dash or a light on the instrument panel. When that goes off, make sure your employees know that it's time to change the filter. Don't run the rest of the day, or if they do run the rest of the day, make sure they change it by the next day. Your economy for fuel will go down if you don't change it, your performance will go down, and it's just harder on the engines in general. Okay. Fuel systems. Oh, I'm sorry, any questions on the air intake system? Go ahead.
Do you have any recommended brands that you prefer to buy? No.
It varies. Sometimes you're better off going OEM. We sometimes will deal with Donaldson. We try to buy a quality filter. In some of our filtering applications, we've tried going with Donaldson, or not Donaldson, Baldwin, and we've just never been impressed with their quality. We've learned to stay away from Baldwin. We try to stay with Donaldson or an OEM filter. The cost is minimal, and a lot of times they provide a better quality product. On all of our CAT equipment, we stay with CAT filters. They just make a super quality filter. We tried going to lesser brand filters, and they just don't perform the way we like them. And you have one filter that fails on you, and you lose a $20,000 engine. That $5 savings on a filter really doesn't look so good anymore. Go ahead.
On your saws, concrete saws, we've heard both ways that you should never blow those filters out because you're going to punch holes in them, or you should blow them out, or just replace them new.
No, they got is yours a solid compact one, or just like a fiber, or like this style, or rated?
It's just a pleated, just a small square one.
Yeah. I'd say for us, we blow them out. For several times. You can blow them out a couple times, but the same thing. You got to make sure you drop your pressure on your regulator for your blow gun. If you use that rubber tip blow gun that OSHA doesn't know about, you have a tendency you can punch out the pleats. If you're at 20 to 30 psi, the chances of blowing those pleats out are limited. Okay. But then again, if the filter's only $2-3, what's it hurt to keep a couple on hand? Right. So you can go either way. Okay, fuel types. We've got propane, and how many guys use propane here? Good. You use it? Yeah. We use it in our forklifts and some other things. It's a pretty simple fuel. Hook it up and go. If it you're not going to get much contamination from it. There's not a lot of variations on what kind of fuel you can go with. It's what comes in the tank. Gasoline, that's where things start to get exciting. You've got your regular gasoline, which is the 87 octane. And that's oxygenated with 10% ethanol by law. You go to the plus, that's actually wrong. You can go to the 88 to about 92 octane, and a lot of times it's oxygenated, but it's an increased amount of ethanol in there. Usually you only want to use those in flex fuel vehicles. Whether it's needed or not, for the most part, you really don't need a higher octane unless your equipment demands that higher octane, for operation. A lot of times you're pretty much wasting your money, to be honest. Now you also go to the premium, non-oxygenated, at 0% ethanol. That's designed for your old motorcycles, the old shovelhead Harleys, your old boats that are running just nice clean gas. They don't tolerate the ethanol as much, or antique vehicles. A lot of them, if you're doing a collector car, that kind of stuff, that's what that's designed for. What you use it for is your choice, but most things do not need the 92 octane. It serves no real purpose for everyday equipment. E85, that's up to 85% ethanol, and that's normally used in flex fuels. Use it if you like. I don't like it because you really don't make that much extra. I mean, the cost is cheaper, but you got to use twice as much fuel, so the price point really doesn't make a lot of sense. However, if you're green, use it all. Go ahead.
Well, so which one am I using in my small engines? My camper and.
You're going to probably use the 97 octane with 10% ethanol. Most of your newer equipment is designed to handle 10% ethanol. Your older stuff, you would have problems with the ethanol. It would swell some of the seals, some of the rubber parts would react to it. All the newer equipment is designed to use the blended fuel. It's designed to handle 10%.
I was always told to use that non-oxygenated in everything, so obviously
that's kind of your choice. You can, but you really don't need to. I mean, the price of it's almost double, what you're doing. If you have a really old piece of equipment, let's say from 1970, that's not going to be set up to use the alcohol-based fuels. Everything newer, all the rubbers have been improved, all the seals inside have been designed to handle the alcohol without any problem. Of course, there's 20 people who will tell me I'm a liar, but everything we use that kind of fuel, we have no issues. Diesel. You got two types of diesel fuel. You got the dyed and the undyed. If you put the dyed in your work truck and drive down the road, that's a potential $10,000 fine. Because this isn't taxed, this is. Basically, that's the main difference. Years ago, there was a difference in the sulfur content. The off-road fuel had a higher sulfur content. I think everything now has gone to the ultra-low sulfur across the board. Now on the on-road, here's where things really get fun. At first they came out with the B5, the ultra-low sulfur, with 5% biodiesel in it, by law in Minnesota. In 2014, they changed that to 10% biodiesel. During the winter, they'll cut that back down to 4% because biodiesel is lousy in winter. It gels up something ferocious. So they dropped it down to 5% during the winter, kick it back up in April again to the 10%. Now in 2018, they want to go to 20% biodiesel, which is not going to be fun for any of us. The problem with the we'll kind of get into the biodiesel problem in about a page or two. And I'll show you what happens, what and what problems you can run into. We'll just get to fuel storage real quick. First thing is keep your fuel clean. If you store your own fuel on site, always make sure you have a fuel filter when you're fueling your equipment, and make sure you keep your fuel filters changed on your equipment. If you have it in the back of your pickup truck and you go to the gas station to fuel up, most of that is going to be filtered as it comes into your truck. It's also a good idea to put a filter on that portable tank of yours. Keep it dry. Water's going to start to be a problem more and more with the fuel you're using. What happens is you get on the bottom of your tank, if you get a little water, it's where it sits. You'll get a layer of fuel that sits on top of that, and you'll start getting bacterial growth on the bottom of that just because of the biodiesel. Bacteria loves corn oil, basically. And you'll start to have problems where you start the bacteria that floats through your system, and it'll start plugging up your filters. Filter your dispense fuel, we were just kind of talking about that. Fill your tanks to 95% capacity. At the end of the night, when you're done with your job, fuel your equipment up to about 95%. That does a couple things. In the morning you can take off right away and go right to work. Also, if you have an empty tank and it cools down, it'll collect water on the side from condensation. That'll drip to the bottom of your tank, and you'll start collecting water at the bottom of the tank, which can cause problems down the line. If you leave it full, no condensation, you don't have to worry about that. Drain water from your fuel tanks annually. On a lot of the older equipment, on the bottom of your diesel tanks, there'll be a little bowl down there with a little petcock. Open that up, drain your water out, and you'll eliminate problems. Best time to do that's before in the fall. That way you don't have water freezing up in your fuel lines through the course of the winter. A lot of your newer trucks and equipment is coming with plastic tanks. They don't put drains in the bottom of those, unfortunately. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, because it's hard to get a plastic tank to seal with a plug on the bottom, so they just eliminate it altogether. And they're hoping it'll get caught in your water separators. Just a couple examples of good fuel tanks and bad fuel tanks. I'm sure everyone has all these nice, beautiful safety cans, except for this one here. OSHA doesn't know about that one. But a lot of times you'll see this kind of thing. You have an old fuel tank, old fuel cans. Caps might be there, caps might not be there. Usually there's a rag stuffed in the top, you need it at the time. That's going to cause you nothing but trouble down the line. Like I said, it's just you're going to get dirt, you're going to get water. The cost of buying a new fuel tank is well worth the cost of throwing that old one away. Now, when it comes to fuel, always use a quality fuel. When I first started out, we used to buy the cheapest fuel available. That was old man Hedberg would do that. He'd go, whoever had the cheapest fuel, that's what was going in the tanks. It worked great until you started getting towards the winter, and we had problems with our ready-mix trucks. Yeah, I'm that old. I used to work on those. Middle of winter, they would all gel up. We always had a kit set up with filters, a fuel pump, and everything, so we could get these things running again on the road. We switched over to a higher, basically it was a premium fuel. It was another 5 cents a gallon. And after we switched over that, we had a lot less fuel injector problems. We didn't have fuel pump problems. The gelling was almost down to nil. So the little extra you pay for a premium fuel is worth it. Use a blended or winterized fuel in cold weather. Usually about October, November, most of the gas stations will start blending fuel automatically. So if you're picking it up at a gas station, they'll blend it. If you're buying your own fuel and have it on site, keep in mind that around October, you're gonna wanna drain that tank all the way down to number 2 fuel so that you get a blended mix, you know, to start the winter out if you're running all winter long. It'll save you a lot of headaches in the long run. Use an anti-gel when temperatures drop below 15 degrees. Even if you use a good blended fuel, it's really good insurance to put a little anti-gel in your tanks and it'll get you through the winter. We've done that and we've had very few issues and problems. Have you guys had any problems with gelling at all this year? Or? Yeah. There's several good products out there. All the anti-gels are all really good. I haven't found any that don't. So, now, if you have water contamination in your fuel, use isopropyl alcohol only in diesel. If you use like the methanol or the heat, that'll actually start scoring your pumps. The isopropyl is the only one that bonds with the water and is safer throughout the system. And you only need a little bit. You don't need to put a gallon in there. Usually a little bottle like this will take care of any problem you have in a nice big fuel tank. You put a gallon in there, chances are you could start scoring your liners and stuff because they're not designed to run on alcohol. Gasoline antifreeze. You don't need it anymore. All your gas has at least 10% alcohol in it already. If you're buying the bottles of heat to put in there, you're just adding more alcohol to alcohol. It makes no sense at all. So you can take all those little yellow bottles and throw them away. Any questions on that? We were talking about fuel filters. I recommend changing your fuel filters every other service. And if you can, add a water separator to your fuel to pull the water out before it gets to the second. So if you have a primary filter or water separator, then you would have a secondary filter on the engine. It just makes a lot more sense. You pull out that water, you pull out the contamination first before it gets to the main pump. We were kind of touching on the biodiesel. Water, bacteria, and heat are all a bad mix. I was talking about the bacteria growth you get. That's a filter we just took out of service and cut it in half. This nice little blob of gel here isn't dirt, that's bacteria. It forms mats of just bacteria, and as you pull them in the filter, they'll collect. So your filters will start plugging up a lot faster just from the bacteria that grows in your fuel tanks now. Basically, the biodiesel at 10%, 20% acts as a feedstock to the bacteria, and you'll get more and more contamination. They do make a additive you can throw in your fuel or fuel tanks to kill the bacteria, but it's something you got to keep working on all the time. You'll hit it in the spring, you do it in the summer, and you do it in the fall. The only problem is that'll kill any bacteria that's floating. It'll plug your filters up, so you're going to change your filters a little more often that way too. So it's a win-lose situation. And this problem isn't going to get any better just because they're, like I said, they're bumping up the biodiesel amounts. So you're going to get more and more bacterial growth in your tank. If you can eliminate the water that's in your tanks, that's less media for the bacteria to grow in, and that's why it's important to keep your water out of your tanks.
Are you able to elect to buy just the 5%?
What's that?
Can you buy just the 5% at a higher price, or
You can buy the 5% in the winter, but in the summer, it's all government regulated. What you get is what you get, unfortunately. Now, you might be able to buy it. I really don't know for sure, but I know that state mandates that that's what you're going to use. I hate state and federal mandates. Okay, diesel exhaust fluid. How many guys are using the DEF now on their equipment? Okay. For years, a lot of the engine manufacturers fought against using it. They tried to tweak their engines so they wouldn't have to use it. Most manufacturers have found it's easier to use the DEF and the after treatment of the exhaust to meet federal regulations. With the DEF, use only a quality manufactured fluid. Don't use water. If your tank's low, your guys are going to go, well, DEF is just urea and water, so I can just put water in there and cheat. It doesn't work. Your computer, there's computers and sensors in there that tells the water level and the urea level, and you can also freeze up your tanks more than what they freeze up now, so no water. Do not add to your fuel tank. A lot of your employees are new, they don't understand the difference between, they see diesel exhaust fluid, they figure, well, that goes in the diesel tank. Make sure you explain to them. DEF goes in the little blue tank or in the reservoir, not in the tank. I mean, you hate to think it, but some of the people are not as bright as we hope they would be. It's part of the new emission standards, like I said. Basically, all it does is it fires up the catalyst in the after treatment of the exhaust. It doesn't go anywhere in the engine, it goes in the after treatment of the engine, basically in the catalytic converter. And it excites the catalyst, which burns off the particles that they don't want going off the exhaust. And to dispel urban myth, it is not horse, cow, or pig pee on it. Okay. Any questions on the DEF?
What happens if you run out of DEF? Does the engine shut down, or I always wondered that if someone.
Most of them, they'll first derate you. Your engine will start if it'll tell you you're low on DEF. Usually, it'll come up on your dashboard. If you don't do anything, it'll derate your engine, so you can barely move. You lose power, and after a while, then it'll shut your engine down completely. Go ahead.
I'm not familiar with this at all. I mean, is it in just newer stuff, or is that?
It's in most of your newer, most of your pickup trucks. A lot of your newer skid steers are coming out with DEF. We got a cat loader or cat skid steer we got last year, and that requires DEF. If you're below a certain horsepower rating, you don't need to use the DEF, or they've got where they don't need it. It's just because it doesn't meet the government's regulations. So you can get by that way, or they get by that way. But most of your newer equipment is running DEF in it. You know, basically it's just another fluid you have to add to your machine.
Okay.
It's just you fill it up with fuel, and about once every probably 2 to 3 weeks you're putting in a gallon or 2 gallons of DEF.
So what does that cost in a gallon?
It's $11. Usually it's about $11-12 for 2 gallons or 2.5 gallons.
How that system? I've never worked in one. How is that siphoned into that exhaust?
Actually, it goes into a tank, and there's a pump in there. It pumps it into. Yeah.
It has an orifice and so much.
Right. It's all computer controlled.
Yeah, right.
It's amazing the amount of sensors. They also have heaters in there because it's water and urea, and it freezes. So they've got where it thaws itself out every time you start your truck up, where it starts thawing an area up to run the DEF through there. The amount of DEF that's used is minimal. It's not a lot. I'll probably go through 400 gallons of fuel before I go through a gallon of DEF.
Oh, that isn't bad. Then.
Yeah, so it's on some of the bigger equipment, the ratio is a little different, but on your pickups and your equipment, it's not a huge expense or a huge problem. Okay, cooling systems. We got a cooling system?
Yes, sir.
Wow, good deal. Use the proper type for your equipment. Don't trust the color of your antifreeze. Up here I got a bunch of little bottles of coolant. Well, these are all different coolants. You got the pink stuff, you got the purple stuff, you got the orange stuff, you got the red stuff, you got the green stuff, you got the yellow stuff. And a lot of times the colors don't mean a damn thing. The manufacturers try to stay with the same color code. We had a picture up here where it showed the different brands of different colors, and they would mix. You know, like we'll just go over. The purple one is a propylene glycol. Very few people use this. It's about the only antifreeze that you can safely drink and not die. A lot of people use it. It's a pet safe antifreeze. Bobcat used it for years. I think they did it for agricultural purposes so that farm animals, you know, if you had a leaky skid steer or something like that, it wouldn't bother the farm animals, that kind of stuff. You got your plain, just regular ethylene glycol, standard duty. This is what you guys might have used in years past. You're not going to find this used in much equipment anymore. We've got the Dexcool, the orange stuff. GM came out with that earlier. If you want to go down the line here, that's we'll go to this one first. The pig stuff is it's a standard ethylene glycol, standard life coolant. It just has CSAs or SCAs, supplemental coolant, added to it already. In your diesel engines, you always have to have the additives in there. They'll protect the diesel engine much better because it works harder, and you get a lot more electrolysis in the diesel engines as opposed to gasoline engines. I hate the coolant part because they've got so many different additives and coolants that you're supposed to use, might use, and it's a pain. Okay, the newer ones they've come out with are the Hope, Oat, and Note. Basically, it's a hybrid organic acid technology, the organic acid technology, and the nitrate acid technology. The Oat basically is your Dexcool. They brought this out when they started going to the aluminum radiators. They needed something that would protect the aluminum radiators from corrosion and the engines from corrosion. So they needed something that worked well with both of those. That's why they went to this. It's also a long life coolant where your standard green, just your ethylene glycol, was good for 3 years. This is good for up to 10 years. As long as it stays clean, tested, you don't have to change it as often. Then CAT decided that wasn't good enough, so they added nitrates to theirs, their extended life coolant. Basically, it's like the oat, but it's got nitrates in it for extra added protection to their bigger engines. It's more of a red color, about all you can say there. Then there's another one, it's called the hybrid acid technology. It's more of a yellow color. You'll see that a lot of your foreign equipment, and like your BMWs, some of your other cars, they use the hybrid acid technology. A lot of people ask whether you can mix antifreezes. For the best answer I can come up with is no. Now if you ask Prestone, they say they've got a coolant that you can put in everything. If you put an ethylene glycol in the CAT, you'll deplete the nitrate concentration, which will deplete the protection, and your long life coolant just became short life coolant. It's the same thing with all the other ones. I mean, you can mix them in an emergency. Your engine isn't going to explode, but if you do mix them, you're going to want to take and drain them out, flush them, and start over. And that's where it's important that you know what you need for your equipment, what it comes with by the manufacturer, and what they recommend. So, has everyone got a headache now?
Which one should I use in my Bobcat?
To be honest, read your Bobcat, because Bobcat's the only one that ever came out that asked for a propylene glycol. But that was back when we had Bobcats, which was 10 years ago. What they're asking for now, I really don't know. They're going to ask for probably either like the Dexcool or the long life. But again, I have no clue, to be honest with you.
When it comes to warranty, you best use what the manufacturer says in the manual.
Yes.
Because that's the first thing the service writer is going to say. Oh, you're
Yeah.
not going to warranty that.
We looked, you had the wrong color.
Right.
Yeah.
You
So
betcha.
when it comes to warranty, always use it's the manufactured product or what they recommend you use in there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And when you're dealing with a $20,000 engine, I hate to keep coming back to it, but you want to do the best, what you can to keep those warranties intact. Okay, I always recommend using a premix coolant. I mean, you can buy your coolant either where you have to put in 50% water, or you can buy it premixed with deionized water ready to go. The good thing about that, your guys don't have to sit there and go, well, that's about 50-50, or they'll pour a little bit in the radiator and pour a little water. Yeah, close enough. It's important you keep the correct mix in your equipment, and it makes it a lot easier if it's already pre-mixed, ready to go, pour it in, no question, no fuss, no muss, and away you go. You want passes on that? Okay, for your cooling systems, you want to test them at least annually for proper freeze protection, nitrate, and additive levels in your diesel engines. Your gas engines aren't that fussy, but diesels, you want to make sure your nitrate levels are, basically it's your level of corrosion protection in that. And your pH level, whether your coolant's wore out, ready to go. If it gets too acidic, it's time to change it out. We're passing out a sample of these test strips. These are what we use. Basically, it's super simple. You dip it, you match up the colors. It tells you if you got enough freeze protection. It tells you the nitrate level that's in it, and it tells you the pH of it. Super simple, super easy. They cost about $1.50 a piece. If you have a lot of equipment, they sell kits like this. Basically it's a jar of test strips with everything on it. They even give you a fancy little tube that we never use and throw away. It's easier just to dip the radiator. But that'll give you a lot of information. It's a lot easier than using a hydrometer and trying to see where your levels are at. Much more accurate. And they're really not that expensive. Okay. Maintain proper coolant levels all year long. Basically, what we used to do is every fall we brought in every piece of equipment, check the coolant, make sure we had enough coolant in there, freeze protection. And that got to be a real pain because every September you were going through every piece of equipment. Now as we're servicing out our equipment, every time it comes in, it's part of our test. You check the coolant level, you check everything. And that way, no matter what time of year you're using that piece of equipment, it's always ready to go. It makes a lot more sense, and now with the added stresses on the cooling system because of all the pollution control stuff on your engines, they're doing a lot more work keeping the engines cool. You have cooled EGR, you've got turbocharger pressures that are boosted up, which raises the amount of temperature in the engine. It all combines, so it's better to keep everything up to snuff. Clean your radiators on a regular basis. How many of you guys are running skid steers? And how many have got them packed full of mud, dirt, dust, debris, sand? It's important to keep all that stuff cleaned out. You should almost on a weekly basis take and backflush your radiators, the pressure washer. I'm just going to add one note. Keep your pressure washer about a foot away. Otherwise, you're going to bend all your fins. So don't let the lowest guy in the totem pole clean the radiators.
Put the red tip on it.
What's that?
Have them put a red tip on it.
Yeah. Clean your radiators on a regular basis. Next one is straighten and fix your damaged fins. I'm sure you're all going to look at your radiators and you're going to see a bunch of fins that are bent down from someone who leaned against them, dropped something against them. On a rain day when you got nothing to do or you guys have got nothing to do, give them a dull screwdriver, not a sharp one because they'll poke holes in things, and have them straighten those fins out. It seems like a monotonous pain in the butt job, but it does make a difference. Keep the fan belts tight and in good condition. Proper tension only. You don't want your belts banjo tight. And you also want to make sure that your tensioners are working in a good condition. A lot of times you'll grab your tensioner pulleys, bearings are out, or you see them chatter quite a bit. Usually that means your tensioner is on its way out. For belts, you want to make sure they're not cracked, not frayed, not glazed. You know, it's good insurance to keep everything running smooth. Inspect all hoses and clamps annually. A lot of you might have found in the middle of winter, you get green puddles or orange puddles or yellow puddles underneath your equipment. What happens is, in the winter, your hoses contract a little bit, and you'll start getting just cold weather leaks. So always, every fall, take your nut driver, go out there and just snug up all your hose clamps, and you should eliminate any of those cold weather leaks that you're running.
What is belt dressing?
I don't like belt dressing. I'll give you a story. We have had an old 966B loader. We had a really big fan on it. The operator always complained that every time you accelerated, the belts would scream. So we tightened them up, but they would still scream. So my assistant decided that he was going to put belt dressing on there. So we loaded up the belts with belt dressing, and the operator went out, and they were nice and quiet, and he was one of these guys that was full throttle, full off, full throttle, full off, and went full throttle, and the belts couldn't take the stress, and snapped 2 brand new belts. Just from the force of the belt dressing on there, it didn't give them any slip, so it snapped the belts. We use belt dressing more as to determine, let's say you got a squeak. We'll use a little belt dressing. If the squeak goes away, we know that the belts are glazed and they're probably due to be replaced. I've just never had good luck with belt dressing. It's a sticky compound, and it likes to pick up dirt, which will run against your pulleys, which increases the speed that your pulleys wear out. You know. Now, if this is an old piece of equipment and you're just trying to get it by, belt dress the hell out of it. But on newer stuff, I try to stay away from belt dressing at all possible.
It only lasts a little while anyway.
Yeah, it's a short-term fix, and it really doesn't do much. Okay. Now we get into lubricants. Okay. Use a quality oil with a proper API rating for your engine. They've just updated the API rating again. So if you look at on your backs of your oil cans, you'll see that symbol. This guy right here. And that'll tell you if it's rated for your piece of equipment. Usually on your dipstick, you pull it out, it might say use a SD oil or CD oil or CF or FG, whatever. There used to be 2 different ones. You had the S series, which used to stand for spark engines, and you had the C series, which stood for commercial or compression engines. This year they came out with another standard, the FA, the FA series. That's for a lot of your brand new truck engines that are out there, the 2018s and above, the real high emissions. Now the F stands for absolute nothing, and that the F series oil can only be used in those newer engines. You don't want to use an F grade oil in your older equipment. It won't work. It doesn't have the right properties. So you're going to want to stay with the the new, what do we got, SN or S? SN or S? Is it SN? That is, okay. Or the CK oil. CK. It's a pain. For years, whenever they upgraded the oil number or the oil qualifications, every new oil could go backwards. You could use that oil for every piece of equipment on back. Do we have the next slide?
Well, it was easy. You could buy a 55-gallon drum for everything.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the first ones came out with, well, we'll just stick with diesel oil. The first one came out in 1940. It was a CA. Then every year, as they improved or they needed better requirements for oil, they came out with a different, you get your CD oils, your CIs, CGs, down the line. Now, I could always use this oil here for this machine back here. If I wanted to put in my old Model A, it was fine. You can still do that with the CK4 oils, but you can't do it with the FA oil. The FA oil is not backwards compatible. Just something to know down the line. You probably won't run into it for the next couple of years, and if you're not working with a lot of the over-road trucking, you probably won't see it at all. Most of your your standard equipment's going to still be the CK, CJ oils. Go back. If you go to your operator's manuals on your equipment, they'll usually give you a chart that tells. Let's see, where's my chart? I'm still on chart. Depending on what kind of temperature ranges you're running in, if you're running in severe cold, you're going to want to use, like a 0W40 or a 5W40. If you're running in standard temperatures, you're good. You can use like a 1540, something like that. Temperature decides what weight oil you want to use. The good thing is with the multi-weight oils now, you can see the range of temperature that you can use. This is, if I could read it, it'd be better. This, I believe, is a 050 or 040, and it gives you a huge range. Unfortunately, with the zero-weight, multi-weight oils, they're extremely expensive also. So, for the most part, your 5W40s, 1540s are going to be what you're going to want to use. Now, how many of you guys use synthetics when you're using oil? And how many use conventional? And how many use a mix? Okay. We use a mix of oils. A lot of our off-site locations, we don't get there often enough to change them, so we'll run a synthetic out there. We use like a 540, that we can use it all year. We can extend our oil drains a little bit, and on that, it works pretty good. On the equipment we have close to home, we use conventional oil. It's cheaper. It's still a good quality oil, and we get to see the piece of equipment more often, do more maintenance to it. That's our plus, is we get to see it more often. I'll kind of go over the advantages and disadvantages, and you guys can kind of make your choice on what you like to use. Synthetic, you get longer drain intervals. The only problem with that, the oil lasts longer, the filter does not last longer. So you should, let's say you want to double your drain intervals, you're going to change your oil filter at the proper drain interval, or use a high efficiency oil filter that you can use to extend those. Better cold weather pumpability, yeah, it works a heck of a lot better in cold weather. The zero pumpability or the 0W or the lower number, the W number, it's a lot easier flowing. If you park your equipment outside, you'll notice the difference between a 15W40 and a 5W40 or a 0W40. The synthetics are less affected by shear. Basically, as all your parts are running together, in standard oil, eventually you start shearing the molecules. In synthetic oil, the molecules all pretty much stay the same, and they're less affected by shearing molecules and reducing the affectability or the lubrication part of it. Synthetic, they're more expensive by 50 to 100%. Gallon of regular oil costs about 12 bucks. Synthetic oil is anywhere from $20 to $30 a gallon. So there is the increased expense there. Now some synthetics may extend warranty. An example of this is back in '97, they first came out with synthetics for the gear drives or the differentials, transmissions. When we were ordering trucks, if we went with standard lubricants, we got a 100,000 mile warranty. If we went to the full synthetic in the gear train, it extended it to 500,000 miles. So at the time, synthetics were that much better where they felt that they could extend the warranty to 500,000 miles. So that tells you that in some applications, synthetics work much better. You want something, Truckee, or just stretch? Conventional oil, it's still a quality oil. There's nothing wrong with it. We use a lot. It's less expensive by about half. For us, it's a better oil if you have to do a lot of changes. If you're working in really dirty, dusty, grimy conditions, you got a better chance of contaminating your oil. It's better to get the dirty stuff out and get fresh. Also, if you're doing a lot of idling, let's say your engine sits there and idles, it never comes up at temp, or you're doing a lot of short little trips, you got a better chance of water contamination in your oil, and it's better to change it out more often. That's where the conventional would make more sense. You're not wasting money, getting rid of the synthetic before it's time. Synthetic blends, I guess they work. I really don't know. They seem to be almost as expensive as the synthetics, and I really don't see a lot of advantages except for a lower pour point and lower cold pumpability. So I try to stay away from them for the most part.
What is that? Synthetic blend?
They'll basically take synthetic oil and they'll blend it with the standard oil, so it kind of gives you the best of both. Basically, it's cheap synthetic oil is what it is, or expensive conventional oil. Basically, the manufacturers just blend the oils to give you some of the characteristics of both. You'll find that if you just look at your oils, you'll see a cheap synthetic. Look at it; it'll say it's a blended synthetic or a blended product.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If you're running synthetic oil in your car, how often do you need to change it?
It depends what your car asks for. See, a lot of the newer equipment is asking for synthetic oil. We bought a couple case skids. I'm just going to use this as we bought some case skid steers, and the oil they want us to use is a 0W40. They want a real low electrical oil, and their drain interval is $500, which is a good. You normally used to be $250. On your car, you can usually stretch it out to about double what it wants. But I use synthetic in my vehicle.
So like 6,000 miles?
Depends, yeah, about 6,000 miles. I try not to even worry about that. I'd rather just change out the synthetic. Like I said, the extra $5 it costs to change it early is a lot. I feel better about it. I'm buying the synthetic for the characteristics of the low pumpability and the better protection. The extended drain interval, yeah, that's, it's hit or miss. We use it in some things like for our remote sites, but for my own personal, I just change it automatically. When the thing says change oil, I change oil.
Now, what are the issues switching between the two? I've had people run straight synthetic in the engines and say, it didn't come off the line this way, it just doesn't run right, I'm going to switch back. Well, then they end up switching.
You're going to get a lot of people saying a lot of different things. As long as you use a quality oil, and let's say you switch over to synthetic, you're not going to do any damage, you're not going to hurt anything. And if you switch back to conventional, you're not going to hurt anything either. We find the synthetic on a lot of our stuff gives us a better wear life, and it seems to work better in the engines. But switching back and forth doesn't make any difference. Now back in, let's say 1960, 1970, before they did that, a lot of people would say, well, I've used this oil forever and I've never had a problem. I switched over to this detergent oil and I had issues. Well, that's because the oil that they were using before was non-detergent and their engine was full of gunk. They put the detergent oil in, flushed everything out, and then they started having issues.
Different oil.
So that's why it's always important, always use a quality oil. And keep your oil changes pretty much. Okay, grease. Grease is a nightmare that I still haven't got figured out. It used to be you had one kind of grease. It was the green or gray stuff set on the shelf. And used it for everything. Well, that doesn't work that well anymore. When you're choosing your grease, a lot of it depends on the application of what you're doing. Whether it's a high speed or low speed process or rotation, whether it's a high temp or low temp, whether it's a rotational type of force or an impact type of force. Let's say if you're working on a gravel pit crusher, that's going to be heavy impact. If it's an electric motor, that's going to be just rotation. Whether it's a wet or dry location, if you're water all the time, you're going to want something that'll stay in there with water. There's some greases that wash out almost right away when they get in the water. No one grease can do it all. You can't get by with just the one tube grease to do everything. You're going to need one grease for wheel bearings. They're a higher speed, higher temperature type of lube state. You're going to want one grease for pin and bushing. On the pin and bushings, we use a moly grease. Basically, after a while, let's say your pins get a little dry, you still have the moly coating in there to give you some lubrication. You're going to want that. You may need a grease for high temperature or high speed. If you have electric motors, like on your saws, that kind of thing, you want something that's spinning fast. You want a higher temperature grease that isn't going to disappear, burn off. You want something that's going to hang in there and keep those bearings greased. And then there's a lot of other greases for other special. A lot of times you'll have a bearing sitting right next to an exhaust pipe, so that one runs really hot. You need a higher temp grease that is going to turn on, which of course costs a lot more. I can't tell you the best grease to use because we haven't found it yet. We've used an Amoco product or a couple Amoco products. We'll use either a moly grease for the pins and bushings, and then we use a standard mining grease for the rest of the machine. It's worked out pretty good for us so far, but we're still looking for better. Two-cycle oil. Just a little helpful hint, when you get your brand new piece of equipment, engrave what the ratio of two-cycle is for that piece of equipment, because inevitably your operator's manual is going to disappear. Nobody's going to know whether it's a 32 to 1, a 50 to 1, 16 to 1. If you have it engraved on your piece of equipment, it lessens the chance of, putting the wrong blend of oil and fuel in that machine. Marker tag your fuel cans. If you have different fuel cans for different blends of two-cycle oil, tag those cans with either a label or write it on the can itself. That one's always a 32 to 1 mix. That one's always for the still saw. It makes life a lot easier. If you have one can that you use for everything, it could be a 50 to 1 mix or a 2 to 1 mix, or it could be straight gas and oil. Because Matt over here just decided to gas for the lawnmower and didn't decide to tell anyone it wasn't mixed anymore. It's important to make sure you keep the ratio. When it comes to the oil, I like to stay with the OEM brand if possible. The equipment manufacturers do a lot of testing Their oils, they'll make sure that their equipment runs the longest, and they'll tweak their oils to their machine. We went over to Loop Tech here a couple of months ago just to check out some oil things, and they had a whole bank of home light saws that they were running their oil through and testing the output and testing the tweaks to the oil to make sure that the home light oil was going to give it the longest service, which impressed the heck out of me. Some manufacturers require synthetic oil. It's usually on your higher performance equipment. If it asks for it, use it. Again, ensure proper mix. If you got too rich of an oil mix in your 2-cycle, you're going to follow your plugs. If it's too lean, you're going to score your pistons, connecting rods, that kind of, and you're going to shorten the life of your machine extremely. And we all know how expensive that stuff is. Any questions on that so far? Go ahead.
OEM, what it stands for.
What about the
Oh, sorry, Paul.
fuel for the 2-cycle machine?
What? I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. What was that?
What about the fuel? What kind of fuel is recommended for the 2-cycle machine?
Oh, for fuel?
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately, I guess it's up to you. The newer equipment can run fine on the regular ethylene, just your standard regular gas. Most of it doesn't hurt. If you want to run the 92 octane non-oxygenated, that's your choice.
Last year, H came over here and they recommend us 0 ethanol.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that's what they recommend, then I would go ahead and go with that. But I've never had a problem running the ethanol oil or gasoline.
No problem. But
Yeah.
a long period, it's a problem.
Where you have a problem, where you can get problems with the ethanol gasoline, is the alcohol will evaporate off and it changes some characteristics. I found that if you're going to store your fuel long term, they make the stable, the ethylene stable for ethylene gas. That works pretty good. Just on a side note, that's what I use in my boat all the time. I fill up my tank with gas and I use ethylene stabilizer, and it works good. I use it once a year and I never have a problem. Knock on wood. Okay, you had a question?
Yeah, what is OEM? That must be the original.
Oh, that's original manufacturer. Yeah.
Kevin?
Sorry.
Yeah, so if I'm storing, my diesel machine over the winter, and I have full, that I have tank half full,
Yep.
and what should I do with just put some anti-gel kind of, preparation in it, or?
It depends. If you're just storing it and never going to use it,
Well, not over the winter, just.
but if you're going to use it during the winter, it's a good idea to, let's say in the fall, throw some anti-gel in. It doesn't cost nothing, and it'll make it so that if you need to use it in the winter, it's ready to go. What I would suggest, if you're going to store your piece of equipment, through the 6 months of the winter, change your engine oil out. That way you don't have, any acids that might have built up in the oil throughout the winter, so you got fresh oil in there. And make sure your coolant is, you got the proper level so it doesn't freeze and crack anything on you. And then park it. There's not a lot you really have to do with the equipment these days for winter storage. You take care of those 3 things, and it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, next one, training. This is one of the hardest parts to get. I'm sure you guys know you're always going through new employees all the time, and you get new employees, new equipment, and it's hard to keep up on the training on how to maintain all the new equipment or what they need to check. We've run into it here. We'll have one guy who trains, and if he quits, and another guy is supposed to take over his job. Well, this guy did a really good job training. This guy, when he trains a piece of equipment, goes, yeah, these levers make it go forward, that one makes the boom go up and down. Practice. So training is extremely important. We've got to the point now we do a lot better job training, each piece of equipment. First thing you want to do is make sure you guys read this, the operator's manual. They won't remember 90% of what they read, but at least they'll have an idea where to look when they have a question. Understand and know your manufacturer's safety lockouts and guards on your equipment. That's the biggest thing. A lot of your skid steers down, you have to get in, your seat belt has to be on, your lap bar has to be down. You got to hit the engage button before the machine will do anything. You'll get guys who will try to bypass the seat belt. They'll just buckle that up and put it behind there so they don't have to use it in and out. Just as a safety item, you want to make sure that all your safety parts are intact and functional. Never bypass it. And if OSHA ever comes out and pays you a visit and they see you bypass some of the safety equipment, just open your wallet. Okay. Tag out any defective equipment. If you've got a piece of equipment that's got an issue and you have several guys that use that piece of equipment, well, one guy knows about it, he might not tell the rest of them. If you don't tag it out, hold the key, do something like that, the next guy's going to jump in, he's going to fire it up, drive away. Well, the problem might have been that the fuel filter fell off, or the oil filter fell off, and it's got no oil in it. If you don't lock and tag it out, that engine's going to last about 3 minutes. And then you're going down and spending $15,000 a night. It's important to make sure you lock out and tag out any broken or defective equipment. Use equipment as intended and stay within the recommended capabilities. Now, I'm sure all you guys with skid steers never lift more than the machine can lift, right? We all know we all cheat. We're all going to take and try to move that 5,000-pound boulder with a 3,000-pound machine. As long as 2 wheels are on the ground, it's good. If you use your machine or abuse it constantly, it's not going to last as long. Most of them are designed to be used roughly on occasion. So just keep that in mind. If you're just always abusing it, you're not going to get the life out of it you expect. Perform inspections on equipment daily. Your equipment should be inspected before you start up in the morning. You're going to want to go around, make sure there's no broken pieces, parts, make sure your cutting edges are sharp, make sure your tires are on, make sure your lug nuts are on. We've had a lot of problems where the lug nuts will put brand new tires on, and a week later the wheels fall off. Part of our inspection is you've got to make sure that those lug nuts stay tight, and you can retighten them after they're on the machine. We have a little more problem here because we use solid tires in all our equipment, so they take a little more abuse. But it's important that you check to make sure that all those lug nuts are loose almost every day. It can be good for 3 weeks. Week number 4, tire falls. So just always make that part of your inspection. You're going to go ahead.
You've been using torque wrenches with all your stuff?
Impacts and torque wrenches, yeah.
Yeah.
But what we've run into is we'll buy a brand new set of tires, we'll put them on, and the rims aren't as quality as they should be. So the metal deflects a little bit, and then they come loose. So we found that we'll put a vehicle into service for about a day, bring it back in the shop right away, and we can actually retighten all of them back up.
You go to Pioneer and Rim and Wheel for some of your stuff, and then you buy the rim and tire together, don't
We
you?
buy rim and tire together. All
Yeah.
ours are solid, so they're bonded to the tire. It's just one of the problems we've run into. Same thing, as you're doing your daily inspection, you're checking for dirt in your radiators, you're checking for, oil levels on everything, not just the engine. You want to make sure you're checking your hydraulics, transmission if it's available, that kind of thing. Just give it all around. We've got a checklist we use. Every day we make I didn't give you guys a copy of this, but if you want, I can make you one. We just make a list that every day they have to go through this checklist before the machine moves. And we catch a lot of stuff. We also catch a lot of guys that like to pencil whip them out. You'll see a line that goes all the way down. They magically could check it all at one time. So we work on those things. But yeah, your daily inspections are important. One thing that's not a bad idea to do at the end of the day when you're refueling your piece of equipment, do your inspection then. That way, if you run across something that needs repair, you can go, oh, I ought to do this now, I can do this, or oh, I got to do this before morning. That way, come morning, your crew's ready to go and make you some money. Oh, I guess I had that on the next page. Jumped ahead of myself. Okay, what I missed there? Yeah, check for broken and loose parts, inspect wheels and tires, check for proper operation. Oh, repair and report any damage or worn parts. That's just, common sense. Just make sure you get it reported or at least get it fixed yourself. Okay, repairs. Repairs should be made by qualified personnel. Now that doesn't mean you need to use a mechanic. Qualified personnel, I like to just say that anybody who has the mechanical aptitude to fix that part. If it's something as simple as changing a filter, almost anybody can do it. If it's rebuilding the fuel injection pump, that might have to go into something with a lot more skills than you have. What you don't want to do is have Matt here, who I just pulled off the street and hired him as a laborer, and tell him to rebuild the head on my machine. Or pull a hydraulic line off because he's not trained. You might get crack a line that's full of pressure. Make sure you've got at least the quality of labor that you do that job. Use quality parts. You don't always have to use OEM or original manufacturer parts to fix your equipment. There's a lot of good quality aftermarket parts out there. Or if you're getting rid of the machine in a week, you can reuse really cheap parts and send it to the auction. But if you're going to use this machine for a long time, I found that usually OEM parts are the best way to go. Sometimes they get a little outrageous on price, and you can shop around. Any temporary repairs need to be temporary. I know most of you guys have a roll of baling wire and some duct tape in your vehicle just in case something breaks. That's good for short term, but always make sure that gets fixed right away because eventually it'll lead to other problems if you don't take care of it. Never allow the use of unsafe equipment. If you've got equipment that you know is a little shaky or the hydraulic line only leaks a little bit and only sprays past your face, take care of it. If you've got something that potentially could harm somebody, get it taken care of right away. It's important to keep this equipment safe, and it's important to keep your employees safe. They're hard to replace these days. Both pieces. Never allow the unsafe or use of. Oh, so we got that. Try to keep spare parts and filters on hand. You kind of will get a feel for what your equipment's going to use. You're going to want a set of nuts and bolts for the tires on hand. You're going to want a set of filters for it. You want to get a set of belts for it, that kind of stuff. It's good to keep that on hand at all times, just so when you break down, you can quick whip it back into shape, get ready for the next day. I don't know if you guys have started buying parts lately or had to buy any parts. For us, anytime we deal with the parts stores, it's a 3 to 4 day wait for them to get parts in. Most of your dealerships are keeping very few parts on hand. They keep them at the warehouse. So they get it in, it takes 3 days. And that's 3 days, you can't use that skid steer, you can't use that lawnmower, you can't use that. So try to keep the common use parts in stock. The good thing is most of your OEM dealers will take those parts back if you don't. Usually. Don't quote me. I think that's all I've got. You guys got any other questions for me that I can help you with? Go ahead.
I have a question. Why do manufacturers are getting biodiesel into diesel? Is it economical?
It's the government.
Yeah, but like lowering the price for it, or?
No.
Lord,
They just mandate that we have to start using renewable resources. So they mandate that we use a 5% diesel, a 10%, or a 10% biodiesel, and they keep upping the levels every year. Minnesota is real good at upping up the levels of biodiesel. I think federally, or other states are like 10%, we're going to 20%.
What about ethanol, the same?
Same, well, ethanol has pretty much stayed at 10%, just because a lot of your vehicles can't handle any more alcohol. Your older vehicles don't have the capability to handle more than 10% ethanol in the oil, or in the fuel. It's just, the injectors won't handle it, they can't put that much fuel into the engine when they're injecting. So they're limited to what they can use. Now, a lot of the newer equipment is flex fuel, where you can use up to 80% or 85% alcohol, and the engine management system will adjust for it. But the older stuff doesn't, so that's why they're kind of stuck with ethanol at 10%.
Gotta have corn people get a job.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't drink that much bourbon. Go ahead.
Well, you don't recommend to use the additive oil.
The additive what?
Oil.
Oh, no, I very seldom. I'll give you a little story on additives for oil. Back before they had synthetics for gear, for transmissions, we used to use a 90, it was a 90 weight oil. And we were looking for something to improve that. So we had a chemical salesman sell us this jar of additive. It made the oil really sticky so that it would stick on the gears and would travel up as the machine ran. We thought this was a great fix. Unfortunately, the minute, or about 3 months after we added it to all our differentials, we had differential failure, differential fit. We had 4 of them fail on us. And the problem was, it made the oil so sticky that when the gears would chip off a little bit, normally that piece of metal would sit in the bottom of the oil sump or stick to the magnet. But it was so sticky, it brought it up and kept it on the gears, got it in between the gears, into the bearings, and we had a huge expense of replacing all these gear sprockets, and it was all just because the oil was so sticky, it didn't let the particulates fall out. So a lot of times on the oil additives, I don't like them.
Like Lucas oil? Like Lucas additive?
I've never used it, to be honest. I can't comment one way or another, but I've got another example. We had one guy used to work for us. He was just a maintenance guy, house or building maintenance. He rebuilt an engine, 350 Chevy, and he had a can of STP oil treatment that he put in the brand new engine. Well, if 1 can is good, 2 is better.
Wow.
So he put 2 cans of STP in there, which thickened up the oil really good, made it really slippery until it got cold. It was so cold that the oil pump wouldn't turn, and he broke the shaft and destroyed his brand new engine.
Yeah.
So when it comes to oil additives, I really try to stay away from them as much as possible. They've done so much research in the new oils, it's a lot of times not worth it. Now, if you go with the Lucas brand of oil, you know, there's a lot of good oils out there. There's a lot of really good oils out there, and there's a lot of hokey oils out there. A lot of guys will swear by, like the Lucas oil. There's a couple others out there that they swear by. And if it works for you, I got no problem with it.
What about the full additive?
Fuel additive?
Fuel additive.
I very seldom use them. I will use a stable if I'm going to be stored. We have some generators that sit for years. We'll stable the oil or the fuel in there just so it doesn't go bad while it's sitting. That's about one of the few additives I use. The other additive I'll use will be like an anti-gel. You know, that's only about the only fuel additives I'll use. Everything else I really don't see where it doesn't add any benefit that we've found.
Because in my dog, I can use fuel additive from start to stop the engine.
Oh, okay.
Because the injectors
Yep.
doesn't make a good injection. I
I'd
don't
say
know that
if you find it works, let me know what the brand is. I'll
Okay.
there are some cleaners like that for injectors. If you get where the injectors are starting to fall out a little bit, you can use an injector cleaner. It's just it's a solvent detergent that'll flush out some of the deposits.
Just the cleaner is all it is.
Just the cleaner is all it is. Yep.
I use that a lot. I like to put ejector cleaner in all of my stuff. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
It's the only additive I've ever used in anything.
What do you use? What kind of?
I can't think of the brand, but a lot of time, the higher priced one is what I've been doing. I can't think of the brand right now.
Yeah, I've never found one that really works for diesels at all, but I have found some that work for gasoline.
Well, like all the small engines too, put it in that.
Oh, okay.
You betcha. All the water pump and the pressure washer and all the chop saws and chainsaws and everything, you get it.
You do that every time you fill a tank?
Just put it in the 5-gallon bucket
Oh, sure.
can. Yeah.
But what about like seafoam? Is that all the different types of?
I'd say your newer engines, you really don't need it. In some of our older engines, we actually used to have. We had a couple engines that seized up over. It was a piece of equipment that sat for like 3 years. The pistons ring froze up. We pulled the spark plugs out, poured a little seafoam in them, put the plugs back in, let it sit, pulled them out, emptied out that, and we were able to get the engine to turn over and run, and it ran for years after that. So sometimes those additives help, but it's usually on a rare occasion. You don't need to use it as a standard, part of your maintenance as far as I'm concerned. But if you want to try it and you feel better about it, feel free. It's not gonna do any damage for the most part. Unless you use a real sticky gear lube, then it doesn't work. Any other questions? Cool. That's all I got. Wander around, have a good time.
Thank you.
Thank you.